Welcome to Get in the Hole, a Chilleist podcast. Join Brant Brownlee for a journey through golf, life, and business, featuring interviews with business leaders and purveyors of golf on how they are leading in sustainability, corporate responsibilities, and community impact. We will learn about their earliest memories of the game and who inspired them to play. Now, let's get in the hole with Brant Brownlee.
Hello, Chilleist tribe. It's Brant Brownlee, your host. I am so glad to welcome one of my new friends, Dr. Bob Jones IV. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Brant. It's really nice to be with you this evening.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Well, tribe, I'm going to do a brief introduction on this young man because his heritage in golf and his lineage is incredible. Your grandfather is Bobby Jones, who has made it on the Rushmore of golf and will stand forever. Do you mind talking a little bit about him? And then
Not at all. Not at all.
What you're doing for this great game.
Sure. I always love talking about my grandfather. I was 14 years old when he died, and I had the chance to get to know him fairly well. Although by the time I was born, he already was stricken with a very serious neurological disease called syringomyelia. And my earliest memories of him were him on two canes, and then later in a walker, then in a wheelchair, and then ultimately in a bed. Pardon?
Now is that start behind your neck?
Well, for him it did. It can start anywhere along the spinal column, but for his it was behind the neck. But even through all of that, which was a tremendously painful illness, it took him from being, the man that was like on top of the world in terms of athletics to by the time he died, weighing just under 70 pounds.
Wow.
And yet I can honestly say, Brant, through all of that I never knew him to complain. I never knew him to be, I never knew him to lose his concern for the other person. He had a very unique gift of being able, when he spoke to you, to make you feel as though you were the only person in the world to him. And he did that in the same way that he did that in the same way that he dealt with his illness. It was as graceful as it could possibly be. And I think he learned some of that, honestly, from what he accomplished in golf. He really did learn that in golf, as in life, we play the ball as it lies. And that's really how he lived.
Wow. And to get down to that weight, he must have been such a fighter.
He was. He was. Most people, he was diagnosed with syringomyelia in 1950. Most people make it maybe 8 or 9 years with the kind of injury he had. He lived 21. And, it's very funny. He accepted Christ a few days before he died. And his last words before he closed his eyes were, "If this is what it's like to die, it's beautiful."
Whoa.
Now that sort of tells you something about the man.
And
it's funny. If you were to say to me now, if you were to tell him that here you and I would be almost 50 years later talking about him, he would have said, "Oh, I don't know why they would want to do that." And yet here we are.
Here we are. Now, he has the most impressive amateur career. And then now here you are working with amateur and young junior golfers. If that doesn't bring a circle, that's beautiful. It's a beautiful circle of life.
Well, it is. It is, most definitely. I'm a clinical sports psychologist. What that basically means is that in addition to doing the kind of work that a sports psychologist does, every now and then I will come across people who have more clinically related issues like anxiety, depression, or some other things. and I will work with them. I will work with them on that as well. But I have always enjoyed working with junior golfers in my practice, and I practice at the Behavioral Institute of Atlanta, which is just north of Atlanta in Sandy Springs. People that are interested can find me there. It's at BIA number one, the number one.com, or they can just go to drroberttjones.com. Same place, get you the same place. And I love working with juniors because I'm able to teach them a lot of the principles about how they can be successful in the game of golf. But by the same token, what they also don't realize is I'm also teaching them a lot of principles on how they can be successful in life. Because as you and I both know, the things that it takes to be successful in golf and in life are pretty much the same thing.
They are, and to learn them at a young age and to start developing that foundation is critical. And that's what, what we're trying to do is to make sure that all kids have that same opportunity.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. And, it's funny you bring that up because I guess it'd be about 18 years ago, I used to do a sports psychology program at the East Lake Junior Golf Foundation. East Lake is where my grandfather learned how to play, and now it's the home of the Tour Championship. And East Lake originally started like the Drew Charter School, and it did an awful lot to revitalize a section of Atlanta, which only years before, police wouldn't even go in. And now these are kids that are getting college educations, and they are really making a life for themselves. And what Tom Cousins has done there is given them opportunity. Well, they asked me if I would teach a course on sports psychology to these kids. And so I did. And we spent a lot of time working on how to develop a nice meditative state, be really kind of focused, lower expectation and increase present awareness, things like that. And I received a call one day from a young man in the class. I was sitting at my office. It was just a typical afternoon. I had a break, phone rang, and I picked it up. And he said, "Doc." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Do you know who this is?" And I said, "I have no idea." And he said, and he told me his name. And he said, "I got to tell you about something that's happened." I said, "Well, what is it?" He said, I've been having all year long, I've been having problems with my math grades. I can't get my math grades up. I study and study, and then I go on and bomb these tests." I said, "Oh, man, that's terrible." He said, "Well, it was." He said, "I started taking all that stuff you've been teaching about with golf, and I went in and made a 95 on my math. Isn't that fantastic?" And I couldn't answer for a couple of minutes because I was crying. Because that's exactly why we teach this stuff. I mean, yeah, if it helps your golf game, that's fine. But Brant, let's be really honest. Only a very, very, very infinitesimally small percentage of people are ever going to play the PGA Tour.
What?
But everybody has to play the game of life. And if I can give people the skill sets to do as best as they can in this athletic endeavor, well, then we can give them the skill sets that they need to live a successful life. And that's really cool.
That's right. That's right. Now, do you still play the game avidly?
I do. I do. As I said, I am living proof that the gene pool dilutes over time. My grandfather, at his peak, playing with golf balls that were, 40 compression and hickory shafts and these just forged heads and nasty stuff. Even with all that, his handicap was estimated to be at about +8 when he was playing. My father, Bob Jones III, he had a handicap of about +3. And mine is my handicap index right now, I think, is about 8.4. So as you can see, the talent pool is kind of fallen off the cliff there. But I will brag on myself. I have my average score is like 82.1, But what I'm the most proud of is that's my average. My lowest score is 76, and my highest score is 85. So there's a lot of consistency in there,
That's
which is
right.
good.
And you can,
And I have fun with it. In fact, tomorrow morning at 8:15, I'm going out and playing golf. So
do
that'll
you
be
have
good.
a golf course, a favorite place to play?
I do. Well, I'm a member. I'm a member at three places. I am a member at the Atlanta Athletic Club, which was my grandfather's home club. We have
Okay.
two wonderful golf courses. And then I'm also a member at Sage Valley Golf Club, which is about 10 miles to the east of Augusta. And then I also belong to Highlands Country Club in North Carolina. And so I get around, and but I'll tell you what my favorite golf course is. My favorite golf course is anywhere that I am with a few other really just enjoyable people. I've never, I mean, I did it when I was a kid, but I've never really been one of those guys, that just goes out and will play all by myself. I mean, I'll do it, but I don't like it. I really enjoy being with other similarly minded people. And I think golfers are just some of the most interesting people that you can meet.
They really are. It's the community of golf that drives me to it.
Oh,
When
of
I
course.
first golf community, it was this smorgasbord of the greatest minds, business leaders,
Oh,
people
absolutely.
in politics, religion. It was so cool to see what golf was doing.
Well, and I'll tell you what I think is really spectacular about golf, unlike any other individual sport, you can be a tennis player, all right? And I will never understand what it is like to hit the ball like Roger Federer.
Right.
Not gonna happen. Not gonna happen. I'm not gonna understand what it's like to be a swimmer like Michael Phelps. But you know what? I can drain a 50-foot putt, and so can Jack Nicklaus.
That's
And
right.
that's something that we would have in common that you don't have in other sports. I can go out and from the middle of the fairway, especially if I'm playing a course that's the right length for me, I can play a hole where all of a sudden I take an iron out or a hybrid out of my bag and I hit it, boom, like that, right to the hole. And so even though I will never play at the level of my grandfather or Nicholas or any of these others, I can get glimpses of it that I would never get in any other individual sport.
That's why we are drawn to it. It's
Oh,
beautiful.
no question. No
And I
question.
want this to live on forever.
Oh,
I
and I
really
think it will. I think it will.
Well, I certainly appreciate you joining us and kind
Oh,
of
great to be here.
absolutely and shedding a little bit of light on yourself and your
Oh,
dad.
thank you.
If you could put together a group of 4 golfers, to go play your favorite course, who would you put in it?
Well, that's a good question. It's kind of, I'm going to give you 2 foursomes. The first one, I mean, the ideal foursome for me would be my great-grandfather, Robert Permitas Jones. That was Bobby Jones's father. I would love to have my grandfather and my dad. That would be my ideal foursome. And we would probably play it either at Marion at their East Course outside of Philadelphia, or we could play it at Highlands Country Club in North Carolina. But now, you could say that that's kind of a cop-out, choosing my great-grandfather, grandfather, and my father. But so if I had to pick another foursome to play, like, let's just say we leave anybody with in my bloodline out of it, who would I pick? Probably I would pick. Would depend on the purpose, but I think for the most part, I would pick Jack Nicklaus. I would pick probably I'd have to throw Ben Hogan in there, although I don't know that he'd be much of a conversationalist.
Yeah, he would. He'd be off to himself.
Yeah. The other guy that I think I would just love to watch play the game that I never did get a chance to see play, and I never actually got a chance to meet. Well, I would love to I think I'd have to fill out that foursome with Walter Hagen, who, it's very funny. Now, speaking of which, nobody even thinks of Walter Hagen anymore when they think of great golfers of the game.
They don't.
And yet Hagen was a phenomenal player. And it's really hard to believe that he has kind of drifted into the mists of time. Another person that's like that was Gene Sarazen. But I can only have a foursome. So maybe I'll throw Hogan out and put Sarazen in.
There you go. Who would you say is the most, in the modern times, the most that is like your granddad? Who would, like, playing ability and style? Do you have someone that kind of reminds you of his style?
Yeah, it's going to sound a little strange, but in terms of playing style, just to give you an idea how dominant my grandfather was, the person that's come the closest to that in our lifetime probably is Tiger.
Wow.
Because, when you stop and think about it, my grandfather nibbled at the heels of victory for a long time. But once he won that first U.S. Open in 1923, he went on a tear that was just unbelievable. I mean, he won 13 national championships in a period of 8 years. He became the first person in history to hold both Open championships in the same calendar year. And he became the first person and only person in history to win the Grand Slam. I mean, the real Grand Slam, the one that's done in one calendar year. And it was both Open championships and then both amateur championships. I think his record is even more remarkable when you realize that in his entire career, he finished in the Open. And remember, he only played in it from like 1920 to 1930 or 1919, maybe.
Wow.
He won. It was and that's what I mean. That's why it's the similarity to Tiger, because Tiger's career is like fire. It's like a comet going through the sky. And that's the way my grandfather's won. But here's one, Brant, that's even more interesting that most people don't realize. My grandfather won 4 United States Opens. Now, only Jack Nicklaus, Ben Hogan, and Willie Anderson have done that. But what's even more incredible is my grandfather finished second 4 times in the United States Open. 2 of those he lost in a playoff. So he came within a hair's breadth of winning 6 U.S. Opens. And he would have had he not called a penalty on himself in 1925.
Wow.
Now, if that isn't enough to kind of get your attention, he played in 4 British amateurs. He withdrew from the first one, but then the next 3 he won. British Opens, rather. British Opens. Withdrew from the first one and won the next 3 at Lytham St. Anne's, at St. Andrews, and at Hoylake. But here's another one. Did you know in head-to-head match play, nobody ever beat him twice? In his entire career, nobody ever beat him twice.
That's incredible.
I mean, so that's what I mean when I say in terms of dominance, that nobody probably ever has done quite what he did until we get to Tiger. In terms of personality, there's only 2 names that I think of right off the bat that I think of when in the same league as my grandfather in terms of their integrity and their personalities, and that would be Ben Crenshaw and Jack Nicklaus.
I love Ben Crenshaw. He's a Texas.
Oh, he is, and he's a great guy. Jack is sometimes he gets a bad rap because he doesn't always tolerate fools as graciously as others, but guess what? Neither did my grandfather.
Wow.
So I
So
think both of those men, and both of those men, both Ben and Jack, they have such a deep and abiding love of the game. And they recognize something that is very, very important. The game is bigger than any one of us or any one of them. The game is bigger than the number of trophies that are on your trophy shelf. The game is bigger than really, the game is just bigger than any of us. That's why in 1925, my grandfather called that penalty on himself, because he recognized the game is bigger than whether or not he wins the United States Open. Now think about that.
That's right.
That is our national championship, whether we like it or not, because you get a lot of arguments for what's the greatest championship. To him, it was never a question. It was always the United States Open, because that is the national championship. Well, here's the thing, Brant. He felt the game was even more important than that. Pretty impressive, isn't it?
It is impressive.
Yeah.
Now, you won at such a young age at the professional level. Now, what was his first? Do you know his first win?
Oh, yes, absolutely. He won his very first win came when he was 6 years old. He had just taken up the game the year before, and Mrs. Frank Metter, who lived right around East Lake, set up a 6-hole golf tournament between my grandfather, Alexa Sterling, who, by the way, was also one of the greatest women's players in the history of the game, and probably would have won the women's amateur, which at the time was the biggest women's tournament, 5 years in a row had it not been for World War I. So it was with him, Alexa Sterling, Perry Adair, and Mrs. Metter's son, Frank. And they played this 6-hole tournament at East Lake. And at the end of the 6-hole tournament, Mrs. Metter calculated up the score and determined that my grandfather won this little sterling silver cup that was just about that big. And unfortunately for my grandfather always believed that Alexa had actually won the cup, but that Mrs. Metter wasn't going to give the cup to a girl. Now, he believed that to his dying day, and he and Alexa remained very good friends to their dying days. And even though he believed that, he never gave it to her either. And that cup is still on display at the Atlanta Athletic Club in the Jones Room. But that was his first tournament. Now, the first real tournament he won was the inaugural Georgia State Amateur in 1916. And that was the tournament that prompted Perry Adair's dad to ask my great-grandfather if my grandfather could go to Philadelphia to play in the National Amateur. And my grandfather made it to the third round, losing to a great golfer named Robert Gardner. And that was his. So basically, little 6-hole tournament. Then there was also the state amateur, and then the national amateur following just in a month or so after the state am.
Wow. Now, one thing I want the tribe to know, the listeners that are in, your granddad, not only was he a fantastic golfer, but he was a lawyer as well.
He was, all the time, people, I get people to this day who are absolutely shocked when they find out that my grandfather never turned pro and that he won professional tournaments, professional championships as an amateur. And what they get even more shocked about is that while he was doing that, at the same time as he was doing that, he was also earning a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Georgia Tech, another bachelor's degree in English literature from Harvard, and later on he went to Emory University Law School here in Atlanta. And after a year and a half, he took the bar on a dare. Well, because back then, all you had to do was pass the bar and you could practice law. And so a lot of guys would start taking the bar in their second year of law school so that by the time they finished, they'd be done. They would know what to expect. Well, he took his in the middle of his second year and he passed. So
Wow.
he at that point said, well, I guess I don't need to finish law school. And he went into practice with his dad, and they started the law firm that has become a firm here in Atlanta called Alston and Bird, which is one of the biggest, most prominent law firms now in the United States. And that was founded by my great grandfather and my grandfather.
Incredible. Incredible.
Yeah.
Family, law, golf.
Yeah. Well, and he used to always say that. When they asked him what his priorities were, he used to always say, my family first and foremost, then my practice of law, and he said, and finally golf, and golf is always a game. And now it was an important game to him. I mean, he was a prolific writer. He wrote a regular column that was published, I think, by King Features. He wrote several books, Bobby Jones on Golf, which is still an excellent book to have. My personal favorite, which is Golf is My Game. And then he did one with the great illustrator Anthony Ravielli called Bobby Jones on the Basic Golf Swing. Even to this day, he has been the subject of I would guess he's probably been the subject of more books and articles than just about any golfer, with the possible exception of Jack. And that's just an amazing thing when you think about it. And he even did a series of films for Warner Brothers, and that became that are still state of the art to this day. And he also designed a couple of golf courses. He did Augusta National with Alistair McKenzie. I'm looking right at it behind you.
That's right.
And he also designed Peachtree Golf Club here in Atlanta, which is probably, even of all the golf courses I've been privileged to play in my life, Peachtree is probably the finest golf course I've ever played.
And similar designs or design?
Similar, but a little more mature. But
Okay.
I don't. That's not to say Augusta National isn't mature. But my grandfather designed. But we called my grandfather Bub. Bub designed Peachtree. 15, 16 years after he did Augusta National. So his thinking around what to do on the golf course had changed a little bit by then. Also, he was working with a different designer because, of course, Mackenzie died, I believe, in 1932 or early 1933. And so he was doing Peachtree with Robert Trent Jones. So, and that just brought a whole different kind of perspective to it.
It did.
So,
now,
yeah.
You mentioned books, and he's a author. Now, have you followed in the same footsteps in writing?
I write quite a bit. I am working on a book on sports psychology right now. It's not specifically about my grandfather, but it is about sports psychology. I've written, I don't even know how many articles I've written, book forwards. When you count that and interviews that I've done, speeches that are on YouTube, interviews on YouTube, I've really gotten out there a lot. I really, it's a funny thing, Brant. For years, I really lived kind of in the shadow of my grandfather. And I used to always feel like, I don't want to be a professional grandson. That's just not something I want to do.
Right.
And then finally, when I got to be around 45 or 50, I realized, wait a minute. Nobody can tell my family story like I can. Nobody can tell it with the authority that I can tell it. And if I don't start changing that and start doing whenever I'm asked to speak, do whenever I'm asked to do an interview, whenever I'm asked to write an article, if I don't do that, then I am leaving my grandfather's story to be written by people that did not know him, that may not even share a vision that he would even recognize. And so since that time, I've gotten a lot more active in doing that. The only downside for me is because of my professional life, like when I do have to go do a speaking event now, I used to not really charge for them, and now I have to just because it pulls me away from the office. But but the point is, I mean, I see as a very important mission for me is to make sure that my grandfather's story is told. Um, because, well, let's be honest, I'm 63 years old. I got more years behind me than ahead of me. So if I don't leave this record now, who's going to tell the story?
That's right. And then now, after sharing it, I can now go and share it, and the legacy lives on, which is so
Exactly.
beautiful.
And
Now,
you never know, where something like what you and I are doing, where that's even going to lead.
that's right.
Whose life it's going to impact. I mean, it's like my other passion in life. I mean, I besides psychology, my other passion in life, I run my family business, which licenses the name, image, and likeness of my grandfather. But my other passion in life is sharing the gospel. And for me, being able to talk frankly about what the Lord Jesus has done in my life, well, you never know. Somebody may turn on this podcast and they may watch it, and they may be, off doing something else while this is in the background, and all of a sudden they hear something and they go, I hadn't really thought about Jesus. And now maybe they will. And so you never know. You never know whose life is going to. Our job is simply to toss the little pebbles into the pond. We don't have any control over the ripple, right?
That's it.
And that's the way I view my life in just about every single aspect.
And that ripple is going to continue on regardless. If you throw another ripple in it, it's still going to carry on, and it's going to get bigger as it grows.
Oh, no question. No question. And it will influence others. And Brant, I mean, I hate to get too preachy about it, but
Oh,
we live in a world now where, I mean, it's just such a difficult place. You go on social media so many times now, and I mean, it's a cesspool. And
it's
yet,
all negative all the time.
yeah, well, not on my page, it's not.
Thank goodness.
Not on my page, it's not. But
And
because
that's how
I'll tell you,
friends is
that's
through
right.
you and I became
Facebook.
through our general interest brought us together. We have the same interest and love, and that's what it was. If you use it right, that's what it's supposed to do, is
That's
bring our
exactly
mind,
correct.
our vibrations together. And then when you do that enough, we can share that with others.
I've often said to my wife, I said, the greatest honor that could ever happen to me, besides salvation and besides marrying her, which is great decision on my part, terrible decision on her part. But the greatest thing that I think could ever happen to me is if after I die, if when it's time, like for my little visitation, and what's left of my remains is just lying over in the corner there, and my wife is sitting in there, if somebody were to come up to my wife and say, "You don't know me, but I went to see your husband when I was in a really bad place, and he helped make my life better," I can't think of anything that would be a greater testimony to what I would like to think my life is about. Maybe it's helping somebody to play better golf. Maybe it's helping somebody who has come to see me because they find no more purpose in life and they have no idea where to go or how to get there. Or maybe it's providing for a secure future for my family. But one way or the other, if our life isn't about something it's like the game. Remember I said at the beginning, I said it's like the game. The game's bigger than us. Life is bigger than us. And if we can't make a contribution in some way or other, that if we can't make a contribution in some way or another that is bigger than us, then what on earth have we been here for?
You wasted it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. See, that's the message I like to get across the most to the young people that I work with. To be honest, that's the message I want to get across to everybody that's listening to this right now.
That's right. It's the secret.
It's bigger than us. Golf is, and life is. and God is.
So we might as well take advantage while we're here and breathe it in
Absolutely.
and exhale.
Although I must confess, I remember once when I was out on a beautiful, I was playing at Sage Valley once in South Carolina, and I was playing with a real dear friend of mine. And I said, one day, 50 years from now, when we're in heaven, we're going to look back on this and we're going to go, we thought that was beautiful. Look at where we are now.
That's right.
And so that's what my life is about. Or at least I hope it is. And by the way, don't take from this that I am somehow some sort of perfect human being. I am still deeply flawed. I am still very prone, like anybody else, to miss the mark. The only thing is, I happen to know somebody who isn't flawed and who doesn't miss the mark.
That's right. That's right.
So.
Well, how can our audience learn more about you or follow you on social?
Oh, sure. Best way to follow me. I'm kind of restricted on my social media page because I generally don't use that professionally. But if they want to go to LinkedIn and just type in Bob Jones IV, Bob Jones the Fourth, they can do that. They can find me at the Behavioral Institute of Atlanta, which is BIA, Bravo India Alpha, BIA, and then the number 1.com, BIA1.com. Or they can find me on my personal webpage, which is drroberttjones.com.
Wonderful.
And generally speaking, I try to get back in touch with people pretty quickly if they send me a contact info. I work a lot with people both in person and also via telehealth. And so I would be very glad to meet any of the tribe.
Wonderful. I thank you so much. And until then, I'll talk to you soon. And I certainly appreciate you for being on. Thank you for your time.
Brant, thank you so much. Take care.
Certainly welcome. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Get in the Hole, a Chilleist podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share us on social media at Chilleist Golf for all of golf's greatest moments. And be sure to visit us at www.chilleist.com for designer golf wear that gives back.